We've given you the best. Now it's time for the rest. My personal bottom five.
Hey everybody, hello and welcome back to Press B to Cancel. My name is Guy Prime from the Retro Therapy, and I am here today with my good friend, none other than Sick Jake.
Great to be here. I'm actually really looking forward to this week's episode.
Good, me too. I have to say, before we start, and this will segue into the topic for the day, I have thoroughly enjoyed your episodes you've been putting out where you've talked to all the guys from Press B about their top 5 favorite games. I thought you've done fantastic. You're captivating. You know the right questions to ask, and you're fantastic. So we're doing the bottom 5 today. So I hope you're ready for that.
Well, I feel it's only fair because I had to restrain myself doing the top 5 with all you guys, and I tried very hard not to dump over certain games that were selected that I happen to not like. So I feel like this is,
Mega Man 4?
I mean, it's everybody's favorite 80s game, GP.
Right. So that's the thing. I think that's part of the reason I found you doing the top 5 list so captivating. Because you're always the first to call out a game for dumpster fireness. I don't know how you would say that. For not being a great game. So to hear you actively wanting to find out what people like, and then like you said, not shitting on those games was wild fun. And I think that's why I'm so excited to be doing the bottom 5, because I typically am like, I don't want to say a glass half full kind of guy, but typically I try to praise things before I let reality set in.
Yeah, you're definitely one of the more optimistic people I've met, for sure, which is a tremendously great quality.
Well, I appreciate that, but I think it's going to be fun, and hopefully at least half as entertaining as listening to you interview everybody for their top 5. So without further ado, let's get it going.
All right.
And then we'll insert the music here. I'm not going to do it out of respect to you.
Yeah, you guys have been saying that, and then halfway through the episode, you whip out your fucking phone. Right? Or you mentioned you're going to edit this episode, so knowing you, you'll just slide it in post.
Well, yeah, that's why you guys should not give me that kind of power.
That's okay.
All right, so let's get to it. So let's start off at the top of the bottom. What is your number 5 pick for shittiest game of all time?
Okay, so I couldn't do that because, and I'll tell you why. I didn't want to spend an hour bashing games that everybody knows are absolutely dog shit and terrible, right? If I wanted to, I would just pick Donkey Kong Country and we could spend an hour on it. So I didn't want to do that because that wouldn't be
Starting
fair.
off with the shade. Wow.
No, but I mean, there's so many bad games out there, right? And they're forgettable. So I kind of focus on the games that are bad, or maybe more accurately say, games that I really wanted to like or I was looking forward to, but are supremely disappointing when they came out. Enough where it's like they've earned that bottom mark on my list of games I don't like, and I'm a little bit salty that I don't like them. So that's kind of the angle I took. Otherwise, it'd be games that are like E.T. on the Atari 2600. We all know that game's bad. They filled a landfill full of those games. So I'm not here to bash on those. That's like shooting fish in a barrel, right? Beating that dead horse. And as much as I know we love beating those dead jokes here at Press B to Cancel, I didn't want to do it for this list. So some of these on my list are okay games, but from my perspective, they're incredibly disappointing, and that's why they're on my bad list. So I'm going to start with, so on my top 5, I had Deus Ex, the original Deus Ex for PC, which is an awesome game. So I'm not going to rehash it. I love that game. So then let's go back to, I'm tired. It's a holiday in Canada today, and I'm wiped. I've been outside all day. Fast forward 2011. Okay, they were bringing out not a remake, but a sequel to Deus Ex. So we're talking like, 2 decades later? Deus Ex Human Revolution. I don't know. Have you ever played this game, GP?
I'm familiar with the franchise, or at least the first game. I remember when that came out for PC. I want to say that was like big when the Sony Vaio first came out. I don't know why those two things are hand in hand for me. But I'm not familiar with the sequel. Tell me about that.
Right. So incredibly awesome game, hyped to high hell, right? The main character, Adam Jensen, totally cool, right? He has cybernetic sunglasses that come out on command. He's got these wild blades that flip out of his forearms. He can leap from tall buildings. Like, they made him an absolute cybernetic badass, right? They took the cyber, conspiracy theories of the first game, and they kind of just went with that a little bit further with the new protagonist. And it's a prequel technically.
Oh.
It's a good game. I like it a lot. I love the theme. I love the setting. I love the story. I love the voice acting. I'm trying to remember the name of the Adam Jensen's voice actor. I think it's Elias Tofuzu. I can't remember. But he's iconic. And I've only seen him pop up in a few other TV shows. And his voice is very distinctive. And I'm like, I know that guy. So I love Deus Ex Human Revolution. But it's number 5 of my bottom 5 list, because it does the same thing that Mass Effect 3 did, where it's a fantastic journey in theme and setting and everything. But when you get to the ending, it's basically, there's multiple endings, but it's just basically in the last 5 seconds you make the choice of which ending you want by hitting a button, that type of thing. So Mass Effect 3 did it, but it was more disappointing for me in Human Revolution when they did it, because it just felt like anticlimactic, I guess, as an ending to the game. Like, I'm trying to remember how anticlimactic. I can't even remember what the ending is to Human Revolution. This is why it frustrates me and why I don't like it. Because there's so many awesome moments when Adam Jensen speaks with his boss, right? And he has this almost father-like figure with his boss relationship, right? The detail on the textures and the cybernetic implants, the conversations you see of people in the streets, right? Like, there's so many moments where you remember from hearing, from NBC's talking about why they're getting, like, one couple's getting divorced or separated, right? And because you're telling me you don't like the feel of my hands, but I got cybernetic hands because of you. We said we'd do this together, right? Like, there's a lot of, like, interesting backstory and lore and dialogue bits in this game that's just set this world so perfectly. But then the last 5 minutes of the game, it's kind of like push a button, get an ending, and it was very disappointing.
Gotcha.
So that's why it's in my bottom 5. Otherwise, fantastic game, but I was so supremely disappointed. Enough that when the game got a sequel, I think it's No Man Divided, zero interest from me. I didn't want to touch it. I was just so kind of like deflated. Not angry, but just deflated and done with the game. And it's a shame, because I really do like Human Revolution a lot.
That's interesting. So, forgive me for this. I didn't plan on this happening, but the Therapizer is coming out. Just to recap, your 5th worst game of all time, actually a pretty good game. I'm understanding that correctly?
Yeah,
fun journey?
It's a fun journey, fantastic journey, but then it just kind of shit the bed in the last, like, half hour.
So, last half hour, including the ending, horrible. However, you don't remember the ending.
No, I don't. I have blocked these memories from my mind. I'm actually looking it up because now I need to know.
Okay, no, that's perfectly fine. I like to try to summarize people's opinions in my own head, because my ego likes to have bite-sized things. So, great game, horrible ending, but we're not sure why.
Hold on, I'm just checking here. Yeah, so you had 4 possible ending choices,
Decided by what button you push.
depending on whether the player employed pacifist means, took violent action, or a mix of both methods neutral. No, that's not true. There's like a button right at the goddamn end. Oh, there's a possible 12 endings depending on how you played the game. Right.
Okay,
So, like,
okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just skimming it because I had to look. But I guess the idea was there's some kind of something to do with the cybernetic implants and people who have augments going violent. And you find the truth of what happened and how they went violent. And you can either blame extremists, you can cover up the Illuminati's involvement, or you can kind of just reveal the truth to the people. So that's kind of like the 3 different ways you can end the story. And on paper, it sounds interesting. But from what I remember, yeah, it's right at the ending. You have a choice of one of those 3 options, and that is it. And it's just kind of like you get a few dialogue choice selections, and that's it. It's very anticlimactic. So yeah, you're right. I don't like the ending. I actually fucking hate the ending. Now, I'm getting pissed off now reading the wiki. And reading what the monologue is. It was literally monologues where Jensen reads off Einstein quotes. depending on which one you get. All right, this is pissing me off now.
Well, okay. Then we're gonna wrap up 4 or 5, and we're gonna move on to 4. I want to say something real quick as you're talking about Einstein quotes, because this comes up fairly often. People attribute the quote, "Imagination is more important than knowledge,"
Right.
and they attribute that to Einstein, right? Having looked that up a number of years ago, Einstein, it's never really been confirmed that he said that. Like it's potentially a misattributed quote. He might have said it, but we don't factually know for certain, which upset me until I realized it's more important to have imagined that quote than to know who said it, and thusly that proves that quote correct. Does that make sense?
I kind of follow. Yeah.
Yeah, if imagination is more important than knowledge, then you don't really have to know for certain who said it, but the fact that you can imagine who said it is more important.
As long as the wisdom of truth to the quote rings true, who cares who said it?
That's yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends contextually. You know, we'll get to that in another very in-depth discussion about the condition of human existence, but not today. Let's move on to your top. Well, I guess your number 4, shittiest game of all time.
Okay, so this is one I'm more prepared for. This is another game came out in 2016. It's actually funny, kind of going through this list. There is retro on this list, but I guess as I've gotten older, I got a real grudge with, I guess, modern games not being what I want them to be. I guess that's the old man in me. But this game is from 2016. So this one is, I'm going to say, it's No Man's Sky, right? Which I don't know if you played this one, GP, but it's an indie developer, right? Mm-hmm. Very small team. I want to say less than 5 people, right? But they had a lot of promise in creating this basically universal sandbox. Like they'll tell you in the early marketing in the lead up to PR, it was like, oh, there's billions of stars and you can visit all of them. Kind of, right? And there's, thousands and billions and trillions of planets of all shapes and sizes. Kind of. It's all procedurally generated, right? Like I love games that use procedural generation to take, just a few rules and just create just wild variety and depth with just an algorithm. I love it. And there's a lot of promise with this game doing that, right? Every planet you come across has, unique colors for the terrain and the sky and the water, or at least on paper. In practice, water is mostly blue. Once in a while you find a planet with red water. Big whoop, right? The advertising for this game was like, oh, there'll be like gigantic creatures and incredible depth and randomness, and you'll never know what alien life you'll find on planets. Yes, but 9 times out of 10, it's the same kind of fungus you're finding on every planet, right? And there's really only practically like a handful of biomes, at least at launch. So a lot of the marketing spin in the beginning of the campaign, they said things like they would never flat out say there's multiplayer, but everybody's kind of online when you access this game. And they would never allude to it. They just kind of said, well, what if you managed to meet somebody on the same planet, in the same galaxy as you? Can you do that? And they're like, oh, well, the universe is vast and infinite. What are the odds you'd be on the same planet as somebody, But can you meet them if you did? And they always alluded to with a hint of, yes, if you somehow, broke the mold and found somebody in this vast universe, 2 players would see each other. That was technically never true. They lied, right? And there's a lot of, I guess, reasons why people wonder about half the features they mentioned in the lead up to this game coming out that never came out. Multiplayer and meeting other players, none of it was there. Yes, it was technically an online game, and you shared some experiences, but you never saw their players. Things like saying that you can fly your ship from one solar system to another manually, but it's not practical because it's space. It doesn't make sense. You'd want to use, light speed drive, whatever. Mm-hmm. But can you do it? Oh, yeah, you could totally manually go between solar systems. Well, no, you can't. When the game came out, a lot of the stuff they said would be in the game is not there, right? There's no gigantic creatures. None. There's no, giant monoliths and sandworms and stuff that was in the PR screenshots. Not in the game. Radio chatter, pirates, not in the game, right? They said, it's a game, you can do anything. You can be a space pirate. Well, no, you can't, right? There's a lot of promises to this game leading up that were not true. And it was frustrating because it's an indie developer, 5 people. I don't expect the moon from an indie developer. I'm always surprised when a game is really good. But the couple guys at Hello Games, whenever they were asked something about their game, they never said no. It was always yes, or positively teasing that it was possible. And that was a problem when people brought all these things up and they were not in the game. So the reason it's number 4 on my list is because when this game came out, I was overly hyped for it. Everybody was. Everybody was too hyped. This is the game where I think they destroyed the pre-order culture of gamers, right? The idea that you pre-order a game for whatever reason to kind of to support a developer. That was a big thing for a lot of PC gamers, myself included. I would pre-order games all the time for whatever stupid bonus I got with it. I've since stopped, and it was all because of No Man's Sky.
Wow.
Because when I actually got the final product of the game and paid the full price for it, I was supremely disappointed in all the stuff that was missing from the game. And it was a very shallow game. It's interesting as an experiment, and there was some fun stuff. The flying with the ship initially was really fun, but you could visit 1,000 planets, and they all felt too similar. There's only a little bit of variation. It was not the huge sandbox with a wide variety of stuff in it I thought it would be. But it's number 4 on my list, and it's not higher. And that's because over the last, 6 years, Hello Games has done nothing but put out quality updates like every few months. Transformative, amazing updates that have covered maybe not everything they promised. There's a lot of stuff in here that was never promised and is there now, like base building. You can now build bases, right? And I'm not talking like, a campsite. I've built full-on skyscrapers on planets in No Man's Sky, and it was only possible recently with the recent updates, right? There's a whole underwater stuff now. There's vehicles, there's mechs you can build. There's a whole space station where there's now multiplayer, actual multiplayer. You can group up players. You can see each other now. That's in the game now. They have they recently added derelict freighters. You get a message, a location in the universe. You fly to it, and there's a derelict freighter. You dock with it. You exit the freighter, and it's like this aliens haunted vibe with egg things, and it's a really spooky atmosphere. It's really cool as fuck. Never there at the beginning of the game when it came out, but it's there now, and it's awesome. They've done so much to take a mediocre game to making it truly a AAA title. Like it's amazing how much of a difference Mass Effect, they wish, No Man's Sky has changed, and I absolutely love the game now. I would recommend No Man's Sky to anybody now, but 2 years ago I would have said, pass. But they've done such good work on it right now.
Okay. I gotta say, I'm intrigued by your list so far. At least the logic behind the 2 entries. Great game with horrible ending, and then horrible game that became, I don't want to say great, but at least good.
Oh, it's great now.
So far,
I would totally say it's totally a great game now, but it definitely was not when it came out.
Okay. I dig it. I like the way that you're doing this. This is fantastic. So waste of time initially, broken promises, but now, okay.
It's
worth
fantastic.
The investment, worth the time.
And you know what? What's actually really great is I am a fan of VR stuff, although I haven't done much of it lately. But the problem with VR is there's a real lack of actual quality games for VR. It's mostly tiny experiences, right? Like toys.
Sure.
And every time there's been a game that's tried to like target the VR audience, it's usually done pretty bad. But No Man's Sky added VR support. There's always one of those things where I would love, it's like Skyrim. I'd love to see Skyrim in VR, but when we actually got it, it just makes you sick. It doesn't feel right, right? But when it comes to No Man's Sky, the VR support is done actually really well, and I actually love playing this game in VR. And one of the worst things a VR game can do is you have the VR helmet on, but you're forced to use an Xbox controller to move around and navigate. It's just kind of it's not immersive. But No Man's Sky takes the 2 controllers you have in VR, right? Whether you're on Oculus or Vive, you have the 2 wands. And when you're piloting your ship, it sounds like a gimmick, but you're actually making the motions to grip a throttle and the stick, and you actually move your hands with the controllers one for one to move the ship around. Oh, wow. It sounds gimmicky, but it actually works, surprisingly, right? Because the controls in No Man's Sky are not difficult. Like the flying is fairly basic, but something about just having that basic controls, but it's easy to translate to motion controls, it feels really nice, and it's a blast to play in VR. And it does not make me motion sick like a lot of games do.
That's awesome. I'm just now starting to understand and get into VR gaming. We'd got an Oculus for like exercise purposes, but I've started dipping my toes in these other experiences. And knowing that that's on there, I'm probably gonna have to download that.
Yeah, No Man's Sky is
sounds awesome.
fantastic with VR, and again, like 4 years ago, none of this was there, nothing at all, right? A lot of the interactions you have with the NPCs and the aliens and stuff was so shallow and just frivolous when it first came out. Now there's a bit more to it. There's now story. They added a short quest line. It's still a sandbox, but there's now plot behind some of it. It's absolutely transformative. It went from being like a game that was so supremely disappointing, it destroyed the concept of pre-ordering for me. That's how bad it was, to being like one of my favorite games on PC.
That's wonderful. That's great. I'm in my head now. I'm like, shit, because I've got my top or bottom 5 that I'm working on, and I have no positive things to say. And I'm starting to wonder if maybe I misunderstood the assignment. Because so far, the first 2 of your bottom 5 are games that now I kind of want to play.
Okay.
But like unironically. So, okay. So what's number 3? Let's move on. What's next for you with the bottom 5?
Okay. So this one I actually can't stand. So let me bring it back.
Yes, give me your hatred. This is what I want. This is what I'm here for.
There's nothing good about this game at all. Nothing.
No redeeming qualities.
No, none. Truly, there's none. And actually, this is one I mean, this game is not new. This came out in 1993, so it was a late entry to the NES. Actually, 93 is a very late NES game. So let me start by saying that I love Tetris. I love it. From the original on the Game Boy, Yellow and Spinach, that's how I played it for hours, destroyed many batteries, to I even like Tetris Sphere, right, on the N64, even though that was qualitatively a bad game, but I liked it. Or Battle Tetris, that was for the Japanese Famicom, Super Famicom. That's a fantastic game. To even more recently with Tetris 99, which is a classic online battle royale style Tetris. I love it. Tetris Effect came out a couple years ago. Beautiful, amazing soundtrack tied to the movement of your pieces. It's great. I love Tetris. So like, I was messing around the Mister last week, just playing random games as you do, and I saw Tetris 2 for the NES. I kind of played a lot of the first Tetris on the NES, and I was getting kind of tired of it. So I figured, you know what, let me look at Tetris 2. Let's see what they've changed. Because I love Tetris. It can't be that bad. So I booted up Tetris 2. Have you played this one?
No. I have it, and I remember, I think I paid $3 for it when I found it at a local gaming or a thrift store kind of thing.
You overpaid for it.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going. I remember people saying, yeah, it's that might be a bit much for it. But okay, so tell me about that. Tetris 2.
So the problem with this game is, and you know, I'm just reading the wiki here. Apparently it's called Tetris Flash in Japanese. I wonder if they tried positioning it as a different style of game over there. Because the idea of Tetris is you have the line pieces, you have the L blocks, you have the very iconic, 5 or 6 shapes of Tetris blocks. Tetrominoes or tetrominoes?
Yeah, tetrominoes.
Yeah, that's a word.
Yeah.
So that's what I was expecting to see. Instead, it's like a Y-shaped piece, an angly-shaped piece. Like, it's non-standard pieces they're starting to fall down the screen. I'm like, all right, well, let me try and make lines. Not doing anything. They took Tetris, threw it out the window, set it on fire, and they made something completely different. It's a new puzzle game. And Tetris 2 is kind of like... it's like Puyo Puyo. I don't know if you remember Puyo Puyo, or you must have played Puzzle Fighter at some point in the arcades. So in that kind of game, you're building something and then you're breaking it. And this is similar. So there's the special colored bomb pieces or dot pieces that are already at the bottom of the well. And I guess the idea is you want to get a matching of 4 colors together, touching one of those dot pieces. And when you do that, you finish the stage. There's not really much in the way of tutorial in a Tetris game, and I didn't read the manual. Maybe that's my fault, but when I boot up something called Tetris, I'm thinking I'm making lines. I'm thinking like getting 4 lines deep with a line piece and calling it a Tetris. There's none of that in this game. It's a totally different puzzle game, and I can't stand it. It reminds me of like Columns or something, or Puyo Puyo, which is something I don't like. Like, I don't say I'm a fan of puzzle games, because there's a lot I just can't stand. I just can't wrap my brain around them, I guess, and maybe that's my fault. But Tetris is one I always loved. I love Tetris, but whatever this game is, they never should have called it Tetris 2. It is nothing like the classic game.
Okay. Yeah, I get you. Especially if there's a series that you love dearly, for there to be a sequel or even just any entry into it where they tried to reinvent the wheel, like that wheel was dope. Don't change that wheel.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
break it. Like
See now, I'm gonna have
I
to
got a
play
quote.
Tetris 2. Yeah.
Game Players magazine reviewed it. The NES released in '94 and called Tetris 2 a disappointing attempt for puzzle fans who have patiently waited for the sequel.
Didn't Einstein say that?
Yeah, totally. That's
Yeah,
notable
I
Tetris
imagine
fan
so.
Einstein.
So I guess I didn't realize Tetris 2 came out at the very end of the NES. You would have thought it. I mean, it took them that long to come up with a shittier version of the original.
Well, seriously, when did the original Tetris come out? That was early, right?
It had to be like maybe 85, 86.
Wow, that's a long stretch. No one, yeah, the quote is accurate. Definitely patient gamers waiting for Tetris 2, and this is what we got.
Yeah. I'll have to look that up because actually when I said that 85, 86, that's just a guess. I'm really uncertain, but
Well, and now I gotta know.
yeah, now we must.
So there's two versions of Tetris on the Nintendo. One was 10 gens. It was unlicensed, right?
Right. And then there's the official gray cart, yeah.
Oh wow, the official version of Tetris 89 actually.
89. Okay, well, still a number of years later, but I don't know. Tetris to me is when you hear the name, you should be able to understand like this is what I'm getting. This is what Tetris is.
Right.
And I mean, yes, you're right with like Tetrisphere and things like that. There's a couple different offshoots, but to completely change it, why would you do that?
Yeah.
But I like that. See, that's more along the lines of the Sick Jake I was expecting.
Well, the bottom ones, they can't all be bad. I had to have some hope for them. But no, Tetris 2 was hot trash. It's a game that I'll never play it again. Like it's up there with Dr. Mario. I hate Dr. Mario for the same idea. I just don't like it at all.
See, I like Dr. Mario, actually.
Really, I can't, man. Like the first few levels, kind of. But once you get in the higher levels, and the thing is full of viruses, and there's just no room to maneuver, and it never gives you the color you want, I just find it supremely frustrating.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Whenever I get anxiety ridden, to where I'm having a hard time focusing on things that need my attention, my de-stressing go-to are games like this. So like Tetris, if I need to chill my mind out and calm myself, I will sit down and play a round of Tetris, or like Dr. Mario. And I find with Tetris, what happens is I have to focus and pay attention to the game and organize that with like what I would call the sides of my brain. I'm sure this is not at all scientifically accurate, but that's how it feels. Like the sides of my brain are focused on what I'm doing, trying to clear out these puzzle pieces. But then like the front part of my brain is working on the things that are making me anxious. And so I can work through my anxiety while doing side brain stuff. And I've always appreciated for that. I don't think I'm ever going to try Tetris 2. This is the first one on your list that I don't care to try.
Yeah, well, you're probably better off. But especially like for the Super Nintendo, I know it didn't come over in North America, but Battle Tetris or Tetris Gaiden, I think it is. It's something very Japanese. But anyway, Tetris on the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom is a fantastic Tetris game for the SNES. But remember, it's still in English, even though it's a Japanese title. I don't think I played a translated version. But anyway, it's fantastic. It's Tetris, it's classic Tetris, but they added some characters, and the characters each have like a different power that you can activate, but still built on a Tetris foundation, and that's why I love it. It's a lot better. And that came out fairly early, I believe, in the SNES library.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned earlier like VR gaming. Is there a solid Tetris entry for VR? Like the
There
Oculus?
is. I have not played it in VR, but Tetris Effect, I believe, that has VR support. But it's not. I mean, you're not doing it from the perspective of a Tetris block. That would probably make you sick.
Right, sure.
But yeah, so Tetris Effect was great because of the soundtrack and the graphics are just awe-inspiring, and there's a lot of different themes, and it's very Zen-like. So when you're playing it in VR, from what I've seen, it's just kind of like you're floating in space, watching the Tetris field, and you kind of move over the blocks, and it's really really meditative.
Okay, so number 2 on your bottom 5 list.
Number 2.
Yeah.
Okay. super retro game from 2020. The Avengers.
Oh, yes. Give
Have you
me
played
all the
this
hate
one?
for this one. I have watched people try to play it. Okay. My thinking was I like the movies and stuff like that, and I like the comic books. I don't know if I'll like this, especially after what happened with some of the DC games, because I'm a big DC fan. So I
Yeah.
watched somebody try it, and I'm like, no, this is no. But so let me hear you. This is your thing. Tell me about it.
So I had said earlier, No Man's Sky put me off of the whole pre-order idea of gaming, which I think is a healthy consumer way to go about things. Don't pre-order; it's not worth it. And I didn't pre-order Avengers. I didn't pre-order it, but the day it came out, I watched a little bit of gameplay, and the story looked really great. The story campaign looked really fun. You're following Kamala Khan, who's a very awesome take on Miss Marvel. I don't know if you've seen some of her stuff yet. Really awesome character. And the campaign looked great. So I'm like, you know what? It can't be that bad. All right, I'll buy it. So I paid the full AAA price for the damn game.
Okay.
And then only to see the hatred for the other aspects of the game come out throughout the day after I'd already paid for the damn thing. And I already put in 3 hours into the single player campaign, so there's no way I can refund it with Steam, right? I was kind of locked into Avengers. So this is one of those games where I really want to like it because I also love the Avengers. Just like you, I've watched all the Marvel movies from the last decade. Iron Man is fantastic, Captain America, all of them, even the Hulk. I love it. Even the bad Hulk movies. So you get a game, and the pedigree of this team. I want to say was this IDOS? I want to say it was IDOS that made this game. It's Square now. I think it was the Tomb Raider people, if I'm not wrong.
Interesting.
So it has an amazing studio behind it, and the voice acting cast is top notch. When you have, what's the two guys? Troy Baker, and who's the other one? There's the two guys that I always confuse. They do a podcast together now too. Actually, what is it? Oh, Troy Baker and who? Nolan North. So odds are, if you're playing a game from the last 5 years and there's a male protagonist in it, odds are it's either Troy Baker or Nolan North who voices that character. This game's got both of them. One does Iron Man and one does I think Captain America. So the voice cast is actually really well done. The character models themselves, there's a bit of an uncanny valley, kind of, because we're so used to the movie casting. So when you look at this game, it has no ties to the cinematic universe at all, but it's the same characters. And the faces look radically different. And it's a little bit off-putting. But the single-player campaign, you start off with Kamala Khan. You get her origin, how she gains her powers, how she gets to use her stretchy Mr. Fantastic style, flying rubbery fists and stuff. She's very cute. Her dad is fucking endearing as a character. He's absolutely supportive and amazing. Just wants the best for his daughter, who's just thrust in this big thing. Fantastic. You even get the origins of MODOK, who is a villain I didn't realize I needed in my life. Do you know who MODOK is?
Yes, I do. Big face, tiny body, robot sort of thing.
Right.
Is that Arnim Zola?
I think is that his name? It's the guy, you meet him early on in the storyline. He's like the nerdy character behind the scenes.
Okay.
And he slowly becomes MODOK.
Okay.
Over the course of the game. So I did not beat the campaign, but I got a good 10 hours into it. But apparently, from all the reviews, the single player stuff is the best portion of content in the game. But it's only about 12 hours long. And for a full price $80 game, 12 hours for this is probably not enough to justify the cost of the game. The big pull of Avengers was supposed to be the multiplayer, the online component to it. But I guess the problem with this is they ran out of time, maybe? Because there isn't much there. It's when you play the single player campaign and you're playing as Kamala, it's great. Story's there, but the fights are very generic. You're always fighting robots, it feels like. It doesn't feel like it changes. And they're very it reminds me of Ultron, right? Ultron's robots, just waves and waves of silver dudes and robots, and there's not much variety to it. Although technically there's some that shoot or act differently, they all look the same. There's very little. It doesn't feel like any tangible variety. So the combat is kind of generic, and it shouldn't be. When you have a game with a squad of 4 different superheroes, I mean, yeah, the Hulk, smashes things like the Hulk does, and Iron Man flies technically and shoots beams, but between the two, it doesn't feel like there's any major difference in impacting gameplay. It's like you're just smashing buttons either way. It doesn't feel like there's any choice in how you handle an encounter. It's very, very hack and slashy in a boring way. Does that make sense?
Sure. So like all the characters are essentially just like palette swaps or redressed versions of the same thing.
Right. So like when this game came out, it came out on everything, right? But as you do in 2020, there's exclusives for certain consoles. So Spider-Man was exclusive to the PlayStation version of the game. And when I heard that, because I'm playing on PC, I was kind of pissed because I love Spider-Man, right? Mm-hmm. And the idea of playing it with him would be awesome. But when you're actually playing as Kamala Khan, right, everybody has like a fast travel type move. So she swings with her big arms. And I caught the animations of her doing it, and it looks suspiciously like how Spider-Man would do his web shooting to swing around.
Sure.
So I can kind of feel like, oh, Spider-Man is probably just a reskin of Kamala Khan with some variances. So when I look at like the lineup of characters, they promised lots of DLC characters, right? And I mean, COVID happened, that shit gets derailed, and also it didn't help that unfortunately the actor who plays Black Panther, Boseman, passed away. He was going to be Black Panther's character was going to be the first DLC for Avengers, and he died. So they didn't want to release the DLC too close to his death out of respect. Sure. So they kind of put a hiatus on content drops for the game. So the game came out, and it was lacking in variety and content for multiplayer. And then the first DLC character is Kate Bishop, who's Hawkeye's kid. Uh-huh. So it's like you have Hawkeye and you have Kate Bishop. They're both archers. Where's the difference, right? So it doesn't feel like there's much variety in the character. There's too much of a reskin. Like I look at the DLC roster, like they have War Machine coming out. Well, War Machine is going to be just like Iron Man. What's the difference, right? And if Spider-Man is just like Kamala Khan, then what are we doing? So it was kind of lacking in the DLC characters. I can see what their gimmick is. I can see what the hook is. Everybody has a fast move. Everybody has their couple attacks. Everybody has their special. There's a little bit of variety in the skills, but it's still very button mashy in a bad way. The only thing I thought would maybe good for it was the gear system, right? It kind of brings some Diablo-ness to it, right? Where you have the random loot drops and stuff that you're picking up. But the loot in this game feels barely noticeable, right? Like when you're playing through some of the campaigns, it feels like you're only touching your gear really just out of habit because it's filling your space up. So it's very generic loot grind. And for an online game, there's also a lack of missions. There's just not a lot of missions to play with people online, or it doesn't feel like it. And so samey enemies, same locations, loot that barely matters, no DLC characters. It's a shitty ass game. And it's for a game that has probably some of the best single player content I've played in years. It kind of sucks that they double down on this multiplayer shit, and it's just not necessary. If they'd expanded the single player a bit more, or if they just released a single player for $40, kind of like Miles Morales did, I would be totally on board. But what they're advertising as a full game is just not there at all.
Interesting. That sounds like a rare misstep for that IP. The other thing is that also kind of feels like the game, just hearing you say that, keeps with the tradition of the older Marvel arcade games. If you look at like Captain America and the Avengers, the old side-scrolling beat 'em up, basically all four of your characters can do the same thing, and they just are different skins with different names that you can identify, but they all have a throw thing or a shooting thing. They all run, they all punch, they all jump. So that's a shame.
Yeah, but at least for that era, for the arcade beat 'em ups and stuff, I expect that, I guess, for that generation. I'm not looking for, loot and cohesive plot and stuff for hours. Right. I think games have changed so much. Yeah, it's just really disappointing.
Sure. Well, and I guess my point in saying that was we hold the arcade games to the standards of the time. So if you were to hold the new Avengers game to those standards, yeah, maybe it's a passable game. But to hold it up to what it should be now, it's just not there.
Yeah. If it did one thing for me, though, is it got me really interested in Kamala Khan as a character. And I had heard she's coming to the cinema stuff, or at least the TV show, I think. Yeah. I think she's getting a TV show. I'm really interested in that now. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a cool character, and if I remember right, she is going to be in the Captain Marvel sequel called The Marvels.
Right.
Like
yes.
they released the title for all the sequels and new movies coming out in the MCU, and The Marvels is what they're calling the Captain Marvel sequel, and the S on Marvels is kind of her Kamala Khan's symbol. So yeah,
Right.
should be a lot of fun there. She is a cool character, and I think you're right. I think she's coming to Disney Plus as well, as is Kate Bishop.
Is she Kate Bishop as well? You know, and then that's pretty much, I guess, the whole idea between the DLC for this game. Kate Bishop, if she was going to be in the show, Black Panther, because of the hype there for the movie. It feels like a cash grab. Like there's even a microtransaction store, if I'm not wrong, in this. I believe there is.
Oh.
Which in a full, like, again, if it's a half price game and it's mostly online, then I can see that making sense. But if you're charging me like $80 Canadian, which is what they cost up here, so full price, and there's microtransactions, and there's DLC coming at some point, but it's been thrown off the rails. It's disappointing. Like, you know what really bugged me too? For the good thing about these kind of games is there's a great backlog of costumes for superheroes, right? So I used to always love it when games like this give you alternate costumes. The Batman games, for example, right, where you can play as Adam West Batman or Batman Beyond Terry McGinnis style Batman, and all the different flavors of the costume over the year. There are alternate costumes in Avengers, but they're like graded by rarity, and I think some of them are locked behind microtransactions, and the good ones are, or there's a shit ton of grinding to get to them, and it just feels like, what's the point? Yeah. It's really frustrating.
That sucks. I remember to that point when the preview or like the trailer had first come out, because now video games have trailers.
Yeah.
I remember seeing Captain America and thinking, okay, he looks like he just came from like Bomb Squad. Like there's just something about like this puffy chest piece that they gave him. I'm like, yeah, he looks like he's trying to. And I think that was a lot of people's initial negative reaction to the trailer for that, was because we are so used to seeing Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson and all the big names that are now RDJ synonymous with their characters with the MCU. I think to see not only a computerized version of the character, but one that doesn't look like a computerized likeness of the actors, it was a bit off-putting for a lot of people who are not so much into the comics and all the other versions of these characters, but just the movie people. So,
and it's it's interesting because the voice cast is amazing. I just looked up the cast again. So it's Travis Wilham and Laura Bailey. For anybody who's a fan of Critical Role, they also do that as well. Like, they're fantastic voice actors. Laura Bailey's in Damn Well Everything too. She's really great. So because Travis William plays Thor, and he's a good Thor, but just something about the appearance of the model doesn't mesh, right? And it's very awkward. I wonder if I'm going to have the same reaction when they eventually reboot X-Men, right? Because they're going to do it. And when they recast like Wolverine, I'm curious now what my reaction will be to that.
Well, we just had this conversation a little while ago about Taron Egerton. So get used to that.
Well, at least we know he can sing, like you, Jack.
That's true. That's true.
Okay.
All right. So Marvel's The Avengers, not great. What's your bottom barrel, worst of the worst, waste of my time video game ever?
So before we get into that one, I have to ask you.
Oh shit. Okay. Yeah.
When you're a kid, how, like, for Nintendo era, how often did you get a new Nintendo cart?
We spent not often. I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
We rented a lot. We didn't buy very often, and we traded a lot with cousins.
Okay.
So not often.
Right. So and that's the same thing for me as a kid, right? Like, I feel like a lot of kids, you get a console. In terms of actual games you had, 5, 6 maybe, I think, for some systems, depending on the system, of course. Right. But Nintendo was like that. I did a lot of trading with friends, and we did do rentals and stuff. But for games I actually owned, I maybe only owned 8 carts, but that's only because I didn't have a SNES until later in life, and I had to really stretch that NES. So it was only special occasions, right? Like that Christmas, right? Once a year, if you're good. Or in my case, for my birthday, I would usually get a little bit extra money, right, in the birthday cards. And I was usually given free reign to spend it how I wanted to. So I remember I'd actually taking money from chores and whatnot. I didn't get a regular allowance. I only got it if I really did a certain number of work around the apartment. So I did some work, got some allowance money. had a birthday, got some birthday money, and I said, all right, I want a new game. I want a Nintendo game. And back then, man, I don't think I had Nintendo Power at the time. Not that you could ever trust a review in Nintendo Power, seeing as it was owned by Nintendo.
Right, Nintendo, yeah.
Right? There's no internet. There's no trailers for this shit. Like once in a while, there'd be a commercial for something like Mario, but most games didn't really get commercials, if I recall, as a kid. But there's no way to know if a game was really good. All you could really go on is the IP and the box art, right? And we know how accurate box art can be from Nintendo.
Oh yeah, look at Mega Man.
Right? Like, look at that iconic silver stallion. The blue and yellow overweight gun. Yeah.
Holding that gun in his hand.
Right. So that's all you had is the cover art and maybe word of mouth from a friend, if you could trust the opinions of your friend on what games were good. But if a game was good that he had, you would just borrow it. So you always wanted to buy something separate. So I got taken to, I want to say it was a Zeller's. I'm trying to remember these like old malls or stores I used to buy games at back in the day, before there was Electronics Boutique up here. But I think it was a Zeller's or equivalent, or Walmart maybe. And I'm looking at the row of Nintendo games, which at the time there's many. And this one came out in 88. So this would have been after 88 though. So it was probably an older game. I had not played it myself, but it was Superman for the Nintendo.
Ah, you jerk.
So this
This
game
is on my list.
Is it really?
Earlier, I told you that I've sat down and started making a list, and there's one or two games that are always on there, and this is on there. So I'm going to have to rethink things.
Okay. Because as a kid, you got your money. You barely get a game. You see a stack of games. You don't recognize anybody or any of the games. Another thing is hitting your fancy. You already have Mario 3. But you see this one with Superman. Like, how could you go wrong with Superman as a kid? How? So I bought Superman for the NES with my birthday money, and that was my game effectively for the year. And have you beaten this game?
Yes, but
Okay.
I had the game facts pulled up. But yeah, you keep going, then I'll talk about it. I'm just going to count this as a freebie for me, so I can open up a spot on my 5. But yes, you go first.
So here's the thing with Superman. So back then, I mean, obviously no guides. I don't even think anybody would have wasted money to print a guide for this.
Right, or paper, yeah.
And, I have to look more in the history of the development for this game, because when you start it up, it's Superman, but it's a very Japanese-style take on the character. Sure. It reminds me of the old Spider-Man show from Japan, where he rides a motorcycle.
Yeah, and he's got like a fighting robot, too.
Yeah, it reminds me of that kind of take. It's like taking some Americana and putting the Japanese spin on it, and that's what this feels like to me. It feels like really awkward. It's the graphics are chibi style, right? Very small body, huge ass head, and the first point it's bad, I think, is when you start as Clark Kent. Right? You start as Clark Kent. You're in the Daily Bugle. You talk to 3 characters. If
Daily
you're not
Planet.
careful, Daily Planet. Sorry, you're right. Oops, I'm mixing my. The Marvel nerds will be all over me this one, but no, there's 3 characters. You talk to them, and if you're not careful, you don't realize that Lois gives you a hint on where you're supposed to go. To Metro Park, right? Because if you leave the building, come back in, she tells you something different, and you've lost your hint. Like the goal of the game could never be more dense, I think, than in Superman for the NES. There's no way to know what you need to do, and I didn't have guides. I did eventually beat it after a very long time, but it was so obtuse to figure out where to go, and it's not the kind of game where you can put away and come back to it with a password. Because if you do, you'll be totally lost.
Right.
But the first moment what's bad is when you jump. Which I want to say you push up to jump in this one. I think so.
Yeah.
Is the physics are insane. Like you just leap in the air. And you're like, oh, well, it's Superman. Leap tall buildings, single bound. Sure. But you go outside and the bad guys do the same jump. Everybody has the same moon-like Luigi lunar jump. That's so frustrating and hard to control. And it's funny because you quickly realize it's a tactic. If you punch rapidly in midair, you stop you from falling.
Right.
You can kind of just jump above enemies, jam the punches repeatedly to avoid the gunshots below you, and then come back down. And it's the cheesiest physics engine I've played in a lot of games.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. It's horrible. And you are limited in the special abilities that you can use. You'll eventually run out of, flight time or eye lasers or frozen breath.
Right.
Only certain weapons are really effective against certain bad guys, but they don't communicate that with you. Yeah, trying to figure out the plot and where you're supposed to go. You know, when I was trying to put my list together, this was going to be like number 5 or number 4, and it was going to open the whole premise of games that poorly communicate with you, because that is, in my opinion, to a T, what's wrong with Superman for the NES. Shitty ass communication. None of it makes sense. Yeah. If you don't know what you're doing, you have to stumble onto it. And it's
funny because, like, whenever I see a streamer that has some kind of form of retro requests or list of games to beat, I always love to slip in Super NES because I'm an asshole. But just
no, it's
misery.
Misery loves company.
I just want to show the world how bad this game is. So one of the streamers I really like is MRR Knight, who also has a podcast, although I think he's taking hiatus. But I love him as a streamer, and he does these blind runs of games. And he has a straw poll for what he plays next. And I think I put it on, and after a year and a half, it finally got enough votes. I campaigned in his chat, saying things like, Superman for the NES, it's a Kemco classic. It's got this great Clark Kent gameplay. It's fantastic. So eventually, I got 8 people to vote for the damn thing. And he had to play it. And he refuses to take help. And he also refused to read the manual. And he did the first mistake, where he talked to the people in the news office and then didn't write it down where he's supposed to go, or just didn't pay attention, left and didn't know where to go. And I think he spent like 2 fucking hours before he took a hint on where to go. And it got to the point where he's like, Stick Jake, hot or cold? Am I going hot or cold going right? It's like cold, hot, cold. Like we did this for a good chunk of the early gameplay because it's just so obtuse on where to go. Like nowadays, I have a cheat sheet somewhere of like 10 lines of where to go. And I could beat this game in 20 minutes, like no problem. I did it for a charity stream once, and I did it too fast, and I got messed up because I had to play something else I didn't like. It's bizarre how bad this game is, and it's Superman, right? Like people like always harp on like Superman for the N64 as being the worst Superman game, but I feel like as bad as that is, I don't think they played this one.
Yeah, I agree. As horrible as 64 is, Superman, and as much as I love the IP for Superman, they have a long history of shitty video games.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. But yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think this is a solid entry into number 1. And it's loosely based off of Superman 2, because it has Zod and Ursa and Non, but they're in weird places like the basement of a grocery store, and that's where you have to go fight him.
Go to the computer center. You know, the computer center. And
oh, yes.
That's one building on the entire goddamn map. And you wouldn't know unless you read every single sign as you're traveling the streets. That's where it gets down to. But the breaking point, I think, watching Knight play it, and then I played it recently, there's 3 fire beasts you have to find.
Right.
And at that point in the game's like, good luck, go find them, 3 of them. And they don't give you any hints of where they are. You literally have to comb the entire map to find the hints to find these damn things.
Are they always... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Are they always in the same place, or are the fire beasts randomized?
No, they're in the same place. But as a kid, without a guide, you would never know. Right. You're literally going into every single building, of which there's plenty of them, right? And you're flying all over the damn place. And you mentioned before, because you do have superpowers in this game, which sounds neat as fuck. But when you run out of juice for like your flight ability, you find yourself finding the one enemy that will give you the flight power back, like Mega Man style energy power back, and you're farming that enemy for 10 minutes to get enough flight to fly somewhere else on the map. Or you could just walk, right? Or, always amazing, you can take the subway.
The subway. And then I think if you're going to save, don't you have to go and like talk to the Statue of Liberty?
Yeah, why is she talking? Like, actually talking.
Right. And, you talk about Chibi. That's a baby-looking Statue of Liberty. It's very funny.
It's so bizarre. Yeah,
it's such a horrible game.
It's so terrible. Like, the combat, like, you're sitting there spazzing the punch button, and you're having a seizure. Enemies running into you. And they shoot bullets that are the size of your fucking head.
Okay, so in Superman mythos, everybody knows he is immune to bullets. You can shoot at him, nothing's ever going to stop this guy. So you see these bad guys that are firing bullets, and you realize they know he's invincible. They're just doing it to try to buy some time while they run away. Until one bad guy, you have to imagine what he thinks. Oh shit, it's Superman. I'm going to fire my bullet and run away. And then he has to think like, oh my God, I just killed Superman with a bullet. I am fucked. Yeah, I just, who actually would ever think if I fire this at Superman, he's going to die? But that guy, one of them is right.
It's just, one of them will get it. One of them will just figure that right proportion of lead to Krypton, I guess, or Kryptonian, whatever it is, and get it. Kryptonite, yeah. And that's the thing, too, is like, you take damage from bullets, fine. It's a game, I get it. But you take damage to the point where then you go back to Clark Kent, right? Because it's
right.
It's neat. You start as Clark, and you have to find a phone booth to go into to change. Although it doesn't necessarily look like a phone booth because it's massive. But you turn into Superman by changing. But when you hit that sliver of health and you become Clark Kent, and you're effectively useless as Clark. You do less damage. You can't jump, I don't think, as well. You don't have powers. And it's not. Clark could still use his eye beams, right? He just had to move his glasses. Like, why is that not here? And it would, that you're going to take that damage when you're fighting a boss. So, like, you're fighting a boss, and you hit that point where you become Clark, you're fucked. Like, it's why not just kill you at that point? It just strings you along. It's really frustrating.
It's a bad game.
Anytime I see somebody streaming it, and they're, like, picking up the kryptonite, because the one color's good, the other two are bad colors, but they don't realize it's bad because they're not paying attention to the sound cues. And they're like, how come I'm losing life all of a sudden? And you have to explain, oh, you're picking up the wrong color power-up.
Right, yeah.
The look on their faces.
Red and green kryptonite, and then, like, the blue crystals will restore. Or, Yeah.
It's just so bad.
It's a stinker. And there's no real... Because I've only beaten it the one time. I don't remember there being a very good ending either.
No... I think beating the bosses where you get the little newspaper scene is all the excitement you're going to get. That's the fact that you took a lever stage down. Yeah, I don't remember anything notable about the ending at all. The music is just repetitive. Graphics are terrible.
If I remember right, the music does change when you go from Clark to Superman. The Superman theme changes, so that's cool. Yeah,
it's the only time I like the music is when you're doing the flight. It does because there's one point, so you can fly. You have the super flight where you can fly around the map to a limited degree. But there's also some buildings where they don't tell you this, but if you push up and hit the super flight button, you fly up on top of the building. There's only like 3 buildings in the entire map that let you land on the roof. But when you do, there's usually a permanent upgrade to a power on these roofs. But
I don't know if I knew that.
But
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, you probably missed a bunch of like there's one that extends your super flight meter so you can fly more. It's totally obscure, and you find it completely by accident. But to find them, you have to fly up. You have to do the flight animation up that building, and then if you can't land the roof, it brings you back down again. So you're flying up at the building, and it gives you the dun 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 dun, and then there's nothing to do up there. So it immediately takes you back down. Dun, 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 dun. Like it's just the fanfare up and down. 20 times in a row as you're checking every goddamn building for a landable roof, and there's only one in that stretch to let you do it. It's just so bad.
I think
everybody should play this game.
I kind of feel like I need to now.
Yeah, everybody should play it.
It's bad, but and it has no redeeming qualities. Like
none.
Yeah, it's a complete turd and a waste. But I'm going to do it again. Damn it.
It's funny because you go to the far left of the map, right? Because the final encounter takes place on Freedom Island, right? So you go to the far end of the map, and it's not. I think it's supposed to be like a pier, or anyway, it's the lake after the end of the park, and it's just water. And you say to yourself, "I bet if I go in that water, I'll drown." Can Superman drown? And you'll do it. You'll try it. You can't resist jumping in the water, and sure enough, you die instantly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know from the comic book lore, but I'm pretty sure Superman can go into freaking space. But here he is driving in the Hudson River or whatever it is. It's horrible. Bad. Yeah. Anyway,
that's a solid list.
That's my list.
Yeah, I like that. So Deus Ex or Deus Ex.
Deus Ex.
Yeah, and then No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
And then part 2, Tetris 2.
Yeah.
and then Marvel's Avengers, and then Superman for the NES.
A good mix of shitty games. Although, like I said before, the first two,
Yeah.
first one has a good journey, just a shitty, disappointing end. But No Man's Sky is a fantastic game now, and if it's ever on sale for $20, it's a steal. It's a fantastic game now. It was not back then.
I love that. I love how I did not see that coming. That any of your games would be like, oh, you guys got to play this. It's wonderful. for
Worst 5 games ever.
Yeah.
But you got to play this one now.
Yeah. So truly, you only hate 3 games.
Well, I mean, there's lots of other ones there too, right? I didn't even talk about Final Fantasy VIII. We've beaten that horse enough.
Yeah, it doesn't need us to piss on it. So
No, I don't need that hate mail anymore.
Well, Jake, I got to say thank you very much for being the first to do the bottom 5 list. Again, I hope to have captured even a fraction of the magic that you captured with your top 5 lists. And yeah, this is fun.
Yeah, I'm totally looking forward to your list as well. I'm especially now that I know that you had Superman on yours. I didn't realize you had that on your list because you played some bad games.
Yes, I have, but very few of them. And the thing is, I probably could have put Superman higher on my list, but I wanted it to be at like the 4 or 5 spot so I could talk about the concept of how poorly games communicate sometimes.
Yeah.
Because again, I think that's the embodiment of what's wrong with the Superman game is you don't know what you're doing. But yeah, I will rework my list. No worries.
Yeah, for me, it's only number 1 because of that personal. I spent birthday money on this.
Yeah.
It was the only game I had for a year. Without that, if this is just a game I played years later as a ROM or something, I could move on, no problem. But I had money invested in this horse.
Yeah,
So
and not normal money, special birthday money.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like when you only are allowed to have one like cheat day candy bar a year because you're diabetic, and so you randomly choose like Bit-O Honey. I'm sorry. Points to anybody who can tell me what reference that's into. But yeah, Jake, thank you very, very much. As we wrap up, why don't you tell people where they can find you playing these shitty games and other great games?
So I stream, kinda. I'm actually planning on doing a BizHawk Shuffler thing set up where I can take suggestions from chat and they can enter it into the Blender themselves directly. So I'm hopefully going to be doing that by the time this is airing. So that's on Twitch, but you also find me more often on Twitter, where I'm just shit posting about having kids and playing bad video games.
Nice. Okay, and that's SicJake, SicJake.
They know by now.
Well, maybe this is somebody's first. I can't ever say the word foray. Is that right? First
foray into our retro podcast. Maybe.
Okay.
If so, I'm so sorry.
No, this is a great place to start up. You should check out our other 90 episodes. And the thing is, I always end up saying 4-way. I never want to. I'm like, maybe this is their first 4-way into a podcast. But anyway, that's gotten me into some hot water before.
The whole other kind of content we don't do yet.
Yes. All right, my man. Well, thank you very much, everybody out there. Thank you for joining us. You can catch us on Patreon. We've got some very special content there. Otherwise, press B to cancel. We've got a Discord. We've got Twitter. And then you can find our podcast wherever you found us today or any other major podcast hosting site. So until next time, I am Guy Prime for the Retro Therapy and press B to cancel. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Special thanks for music go to Arthur the Last Ancient on Spotify or The Last Ancient on Bandcamp. For more episodes, please visit our website at pressbtocancel.com. And also, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Patreon. As always, thank you. This has been
Press B to cancel.
Press B to